You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and we have Nick Friesen from the wonderful enclave of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Nick, welcome onto the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast.
Thanks for having me from the geographical center of Canada, Ken.
Yes, central city, mid-city, right in the middle, right?
Yeah, man. It's like right when you say you drive about a half hour outside the city, there's like a sign that says you are in the longitudinal center of Canada right now. So that is where we're at, middle province, baby.
Yeah, but sometimes people think middle and they don't think exciting. Everybody has to go to the extreme, one side or the other. The middle is the meeting spot here. So everybody, Nick's a talented artist, and one really cool thing about looking at his work is we're talking music in a variety of forms. Nick, I've heard you describe yourself as a curator, which I think is obvious once you show any backgrounds around where you are. The comic Olivia Sea, which is just an enthralling, colorful, energetic thing that you work on. And of course,
thank you.
The conceit behind behind Olivia Sea is this fictional group universe where if you hear those words and that makes you excited, then that's where we are. But we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff and about art itself, but you're releasing new Olivia Sea, and it's such a fascinating project. Like, what's the jam? What's the Olivia Sea's jam? What's going on?
So maybe I'll give you a quick history lesson on this project. So it's a multimedia project. The name of the character is Olivia Sea, and I mean, this was a character that I started out just kind of like drawing on other posters for like other bands and stuff in Winnipeg, or like anytime there was anything I needed to put a character, it was like her and her little robot 4-track. I started putting them on different posters, and it just kind of started taking on this life. And then a buddy of mine, we were jamming on some tunes and like testing out recording equipment, and we both had our own bands. But I was like, hey, do you just want to come over and test out this equipment? And his name's Andy Cole, and he has a bunch of bands like Eagle Lake Owls, Great Wealth, Hearing Trees. He's an incredible multi-instrumentalist and songwriter. And we'd never jammed on anything before. And we spent an afternoon and we made like 5 or 6 songs, like just switching instruments. Like, okay, I'm going to sit on the drums and you're going to be on guitar, and then I'm going to sit on bass and you're going to be on drums, and just kind of switching it up. And those songs sat there for maybe a year or two. And at the other time, like I'd been writing in various incarnations, like short stories and screenplays and all this different stuff, this character Olivia Sea and her story, and kind of growing that character. And then out of the blue one day I was just like, dude, what if these are Olivia Sea's songs? And he's like, oh, I like that. And then it became finding the right voice for the character, knowing that there would be an animated component as well, because I've been doing these hand-drawn animated music videos for other musicians. And so there'd be that. And then so we needed someone who could be an actor and a singer. And I talked to a few different singers, and they were like, I don't know, this is kind of confusing. I don't want to confuse it with my other like existing musical projects. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's like Gorillaz or Gem and the Holograms or the Archies or whatever, right? Like it's an animated band. It's like Prozac. Like you'll be behind it, like, so no one really needs to know it's you, but they were just kind of like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then I remembered I'd met this young actress who was also a really talented, trained singer, like musicals, but also like jazz and all this other stuff. And I was like, I just kind of cold called her and took her for a coffee. And coincidentally, her name is Olivia Rain. And I was like, look, like I've only met you like once or twice, but this is the project. And are you interested? Like, do you like ever listen to any like indie rock? Like it's very like the band Always or The National sometimes, but it's also got like a little bit of twang sometimes, like a little Wilco, like, so it's just kind of whatever comes out. And she's like, yeah, I don't know, like I'll sing whatever. I'll give this a go. And it's been going that way for a few years now. And we put out an EP called Purposeful Movements. And at that point, Andy and Olivia still hadn't met each other. Like Olivia came in and recorded her vocals on those existing tracks. And then my buddy Matt Powers, who he's been in a number of other bands in Winnipeg, like Vampires and Midnight Review Presents. He's an amazing drummer and songwriter and multi-instrumentalist in his own right. But he was just like, dude, we've been talking about doing something for a while. Like this could be the thing. And so I bring in Matt and Andy and Olivia one weekend before the pandemic happened, and we recorded the second record, Artificial Landscape, Artificial Heart. And that one I did a like a Simpsons style animated music video for a song called I Choo Choo Choose You, which I think is like our most watched video. So that's very cool. And also like Winnipeg and the Simpsons have a very big, like there's lots of references, like that's it, back to Winnipeg, stuff like that. So I was like, let's play around with that a little bit. And I believe that like Matt Groening's family is from Winnipeg, like Homer is a Winnipegger type of thing in real life. So there's all that to it. But then also like, I was like, okay, so I had been kind of crafting this like animated film, this story to go along with it. And my wife says to me, like, you're getting into comics more and more. Wouldn't it be more fun and a lot less time consuming if you maybe
what a combo.
Yeah, like that's my jam. Like let's do this. Let's make it all easier on ourselves. So over the pandemic, I started to do it as comics, like taking the existing stuff that I'd already created for this hand-drawn animation, and I pencil and I ink and then I digitally color. And so that was how things were going. And I wound up working on, it's like 140-page graphic novel. And then I was like, oh man, like, yeah, this is a thing now, but I want to start going to like comic shows and things. And so I'm going to have to make up some quick little like mini comics and zines and things like that. And so last October, I went to Toronto for CanZine, and I brought this along with me here. I'm holding up here. This is the first issue of The Unpredictable Olivia Sea. It's a 20-page black and white comic, color covers, and it's like a prequel to the graphic novel that nobody's read. But I think I'm going to turn the graphic novel into 20-page floppies as well, just to like keep it going as a series, and then probably do it all as one big thing. So that is the very long and involved story. And I mean the character too. She's a she's an indie rocker. She's got girl issues. She's got a crush on this one girl in her dance class, and her girlfriend's jealous of that. But she becomes a vigilante at night, and she's a waitress and she's a ballerina and all this other stuff. So yeah.
I love it, and it just, you're mentioning trying to wrap up with all that stuff, and just pausing for a moment. Yeah, like it's a really cool format, and I think what I'm pausing is like knowing your enjoyment of comics, and and myself as well, is such the vibrancy of it, right? So immediately I see your work, and I see all that color, and I see this character, and I'm all in because I can jump quickly into that. So, and it's a special thing for me. I've always done it my life, and I also think what's really cool is, I don't know, just to dig into like, you had an ad in one of our favorite comics that we share, is Santos Sisters by Greg and Fee.
So good, eh?
It's a great comic, and I've been having it on the podcast, and it's so fantastic. And then you and I are talking. We were bound to run into each other. At least me with the Winnipeg thing, I was going to run into at some point. And so, like, I've always wanted to, get into Winnipeg. But then on one page we got Olivia Sea ad, and on one side you got the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast QR code. So if you have that issue, folks, Santos Sisters number 3. We're all in the same spot, right in the comic.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet thing. And like, I mean, I love that old school vibe that the Santos Sisters is. Like, it's printed on newsprint. Like, I've done some mini comics that way because you can buy sheets of newsprint. Like, I don't know where they're getting a newsprint comic printed these days, but like, it's got that like that old school Archie comics vibe, but in like a really like twisted, hilarious setting, like that's totally different than what the Archies ever got into. But it's also got that like that great like, I don't know, I just kind of, the way I draw, it's what comes out. So it's kind of this it's like a clear line, kind of like a Tintin Hergé thing. It's kind of like a Dan Klaus. Like, I'm nowhere near as amazing as Dan Klaus, obviously nobody is, but like very like realistic, but with a cartoony feel, and then like very flat colors, you know, like I don't do like the airbrushy thing. Like I want it to look like the cartoons very much feel like a 70s Hanna-Barbera type of thing, and that's the same vibe that I'm giving with the comics, because that's just what comes out of me. Like I'm not trying to make it look a certain way, that's just what it is, and that's what I love. So yeah, and I think that, you know, like I back and forth a little with Greg and Fake on Instagram there, and they seem to like what I'm throwing down too, and that's a huge compliment when someone that you love is gives you the nod, like you're all right, kid.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, one of the things on the podcast, and you know, it's great to have you, because you're an artist who does a lot of different things, who thinks of these combinations, and I love that. But I always love within my episodes dropping into comic books, comic book culture, illustrators. I've had Joelle Jones on. I've had friends in the Portland area. You know, we did a what if episode, which is like 2.5 hours, which is the episode I always wanted to talk, like, you know, it's like kind of the podcast area where like, I'm not too sure here. We're 2.25 hours into what if, but I do have one of those episodes. We got it all out, but just like dropping into comics with the podcast, it's really fun. It's really fun. That's one of the reasons I do it, and I really enjoy you know, you coming out with the material that you have coming out. And gosh, I have it written right here on the top, cassettes, right?
Yeah, man. So because I was going to these shows and talking to, you know, like it's like a real DIY zines and things like that. So,
Yeah.
and I'd only put out Olivia Sea on like, it's on streaming, your Spotify or Apple, whatever, and it's on Bandcamp. But I wanted something physical to be able to sell at these comic shows. And so, yeah, we got little cassettes. I printed up a small run of cassettes. I've been in bands over the years, and I've always very much DIY'd everything. So even just to send off and get like a physical copy of Olivia Sea's Crush-A-Rama cassette tape, it's very cool. And so like at that first show that I went to in Toronto last year, it was like people are going like, okay, like what's the deal here? And I was like, well, this is my character, and this is her tape, and blah blah blah. And people are like, so what's on the tape? I was like, it's real music. Like we've made multiple albums worth of songs for this character and this idea, and it just like people don't know what to think of it. But yeah,
where is the person? Where is...
Yeah, she doesn't exist. But to some, that's the thing too. It's like you can just enjoy the music, or you can enjoy the comics, or you can enjoy the lore. Like I've heard like, you know, campus radio in Canada and in the States like playing Olivia Sea and not knowing if she's real or not. And like sometimes they're just like, yeah, here's a new artist from Canada, and it's Olivia Sea. And sometimes they're like trying to figure out the thing. They're like, I did some Googling. So that's pretty fun. But it's just like, I don't know, like I don't want to have to rely on a gimmick, but this is the way that this project organically came out. It's also like not a big time commitment for the other musicians, right? So if we get together once or twice a year and make a few songs, and like right now the way we're releasing it is like each comic issue is going to have a single released alongside it. So I just put out issue 2, and the new single is called Lottie in the Black and White Room, and so that's on streaming. And then if you go, there's a QR code in issue 2 that'll take you to the Bandcamp, and that actually has like a couple of B-sides and stuff, but that is all the songs that are in the issue. So there's 4 songs in the new issue, so you can read along and listen along while you're reading the issue, which is kind of like a fun multimedia. It's like a book on tape, you know, like when we were kids, which is what I listened to. I still have my little red Sony Walkman that took 4 AA batteries, and I'd listen to my books on tape and like just jam it out. So
there's really something to that. I keep bumping into this, and you know, I don't know if let me know your thoughts, but I've gone through a lot throughout my life and not really stopped at the small press area, the zine area, all that type of thing. And when I moved out to Pacific Northwest and was around this type of culture, it was, you know, like dropping into the room, right? Or that comic book store, and like, oh, the universe is over there. And I started to do that. And it's been a huge change, and it's a beautiful dynamic to be in and to see all these things. But I wanted to zero in on something that I feel maybe it's just my contact with it, or maybe there's more of it. After the pandemic, people are grabbing after like VHS tapes, the resurgence in CDs, which were like nobody would even look at them for a period of time. Do you think there's something going on with like just this strong attachment, like right now to tangible media, DIY stuff?
100%. Yeah. I mean, like there's guys like you and I that grew up with all this stuff. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I still have a massive collection. I'm looking at a wall on one end of my basement right now that has about 2,400 CDs on it. And then there's another wall that has, a few hundred records. And I still have a bunch of cassettes. And then like the physical media I started to get way back into over the pandemic was like physical comic books. Like I'd always grown up with them. I read a lot of Dark Horse, and like like my big two guys were like your Spider-Man and your Batman. But like Dark Horse was putting out some great Star Wars books in the '90s. They had The Mask. They had like Milk and Cheese, like all sorts of great stuff. And then like a lot of Canadian, like Chester Brown is one of my favorites, and Seth,
Yeah.
like those guys are just friggin' amazing. Ho Che Anderson. Amazing storytellers and cartoonists. But I was really I like to physically go to a shop or a flea market or something and just like I love the flip through. I love finding something that I'm not going to necessarily like know to look for online or know that it exists, right? And I mean, I think that we also have a generation of kids that didn't grow up with the physical but are now like, oh, like I can hold this stuff. Like
That's possible. Like it's possible to hold the thing.
Yeah, like I don't have to look at it on my phone. Like it's almost like they're rejecting screen time and they're going to like the physical media. Whether like I don't think anyone's going to go back to DVDs. Like you got your Blu-ray collectors, and like that's a big thing that I tapered down. Like I organize my DVDs by director. Like I've got my Wes Andersons, Into the Coen Brothers, et cetera, et cetera. But I've really slowed on that because I subscribe to 6 streaming services.
Yeah.
And I know and it's like, okay, like, yes, I'll get the new, the new Scorsese when it's out on DVD and just put it on the shelf and feel good about it. But like, and I'll still, same with records, same with CDs, but I do not want to read a comic on my phone or on my computer. I can, but I like the idea of being able to like test it out on there before I buy the physical. But I really do love still that surprise of going into a shop and having my little list. Like I'm working on a Daredevil run right now, which is the first volume is 380 issues, Ken. So it's a lot to, and I mean other stuff. I'm working on a Marvel G.I. Joe run. I'm working on a few different runs right now, but yeah, it's some issues it's like very easy to find. You see them in every shop you go to. Other issues you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to gamble a little bit here and maybe order online or something like that. But I don't know, man, like there's still something about the smell and the feel and being able to catalog it. And I mean, if I lived in a small apartment by myself, I wouldn't be able to do that probably, but I have a home with a basement, and I have enough room and a very, very loving, trusting wife, who, she's like, hey, a lot of people have a lot worse vices than collecting stuff. So
That's your thing, and you're going to run a long time with it. I just read the Frank Miller Elektra bit with the Daredevil, and it was great. Bookstore, which the podcast works with, Browser's Bookstore, just a couple blocks from me in Albany, Oregon. They had it still in that old plastic, so it was one of those like 80s, the ones like the 80s, heavier graphic novels. In that plastic where you're like, this is 25-year-old plastic, and break open, and
it's like so cracks when you touch it.
Oh, I was like, so it was I'm a huge Daredevil fan. It sounds like a bit too, and talking about comics, I'm a sucker for the big ones, Batman, Spider-Man, like how you throw that to me every day. But a lot of great
those are cartoons, that I like. The first cartoon I can remember watching is Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends with Iceman and Firestar. And that's like, I would go to garage sales and I picked up like there was like a little like novel size of the first 6 issues of Spider-Man and Amazing Fantasy 15, and it's like someone had like scribbled all over it. But for years, that was like my Spider-Man comic.
Oh yeah.
And I'd carry it with me, like that's how we get into it. Like the gateway drug is your big guys, your Batman and your Spider-Man, and or like this the Superpowers TV show, and I had all the action figures, and I still do, like so. Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm gonna, folks, as part of this too, I need to chat, and this might be a little bit weird about Winnipeg, Nick. So I'm gonna tell you where I'm coming from.
Please, yeah.
So I'm the biggest Winnipeg fan out of people who've never been to Winnipeg. So that's the category. That's where I am. My sweetie Jenny and I were looking at plane tickets. When we're serious about Winnipeg, well, she's serious because I'm serious about Winnipeg. So
my wife's name is Jenny, by the way, as well.
So incredible. So when I was a kid, a kid walking around, wasn't a big hockey fan, grew up in New England. It was a Boston Celtics, Red Sox, all that type of thing. But I always was really fascinated by hockey. And I just chose, I was a Bruins fan, no doubt about that. That's the way you got to live. I was also a Winnipeg Jets fan. Far away, no strong attachment to the team, no explanation why. And of course, Winnipeg lost their Jets and then they were back right around the time I really got into hockey. Like I was studying it more. I've never played it. I was reading Jets history. I was getting my gear, and it's like Boston and Winnipeg. So I got into the Winnipeg thing, and then I just wanted to know more. Now the entry point was labor history. So I'm a union rep in my day job. So I started reading about these incredible movements in Winnipeg.
The 1919 general strike, yeah.
Right, the general strike. And I'm like, well, you're not going to bump into these things in this world. So I read about that, and maybe bumped into, I believe it was My Winnipeg, the short black and white film.
Yeah, the Guy Madden film. Yeah.
Guy Madden film, which was wonderful. There was an actress in there. I think her name was Kate Yakula, who played Citizen Girl. And just these. Yes. Well, that was great.
My Winnipeg is that like so much of it, like so Guy Madden is this, he's black and white film director from Winnipeg, and he puts Vaseline on the lenses, and he shoots on old Super 8 cameras, and he's made the saddest music in the world with Isabella Rossellini and a number of incredible films. But a lot of the time, Guy Madden is also a character played by a different actor in two of the films by Darcy Fair. And so Darcy, as Guy, is trying to escape Winnipeg, but he can't escape his Winnipeg. And it was originally just pitched as a documentary, but then it turned into this documentary that was also like, here's some truth about Winnipeg and some falsehoods about Winnipeg, and a lot of the stuff that is insane, like If Day, where a bunch of Winnipeggers dressed up like Nazis and was like, what if Nazis occupied Winnipeg? That was a thing that was sanctioned by the city in the like 30s or something, right? Like it was just bonkers. Yeah. Here's a fun thing you maybe you'll check out. Maybe some of your listeners might want to check out if they're also into Winnipeg. But I actually produce a Winnipeg podcast called One Great History that is hosted by Sabrina Janke and Alex Judge, who are two pretty hilarious and smart genius historians that have worked as tour guides and historians and stuff in Winnipeg. And like we talked about the general strike, we've talked about If Day, we've talked about a number of things. We've been doing this podcast for a few years now. So go check out One Great History.
Nick. I mean, pause. All right, thank you, Nick. This is where it becomes personal. We're doing a show. Yeah, all right. The history podcast. That's why these are some of the ancillary or important things that I got you on for to pull it together. No, that's great. I love to dig into that stuff. And the about the podcast itself, the name again, and where folks find it. And
so it's streaming on your Spotify and your Apple and whatever, and it's called One Great History because for a number of years our slogan was One Great City. You'd see it on the the signs now entering Winnipeg, One Great City. There's a Winnipeg band called the Weaker Thans who has a song called One Great City, where the chorus just says "I hate Winnipeg," and it is like It's Winnipeg has this like great like self-deprecating, like we're bargain crazy, we're stuck in the past. Hence when like the Jets left in 95, 96, and then they came back and they were going to be called something other than the Jets, and people practically rioted at Portage in Maine, which is like the big
They should
intersection
have.
of Maine.
They should have.
Yeah.
I'm ignorant on this, but they should have.
Well, it was like the outcry was so loud that they were like, fine, we'll call them the Jets. Even though anytime they take the ice and say, your Winnipeg Jets, I say to myself, these aren't my Winnipeg Jets. My Winnipeg Jets are Teemu Selanne and Dave Manson and Keith Tkachuk and Chris Kang and all these older guys. Like now the Winnipeg Jets are younger than me, which really throws me off. So that like they're half my age. It's crazy. But something I wanted to show you here, Ken, this is a CD called Hockey Rock.
Hockey
Winnipeg
Rock.
Jets style. Have you ever heard about this online?
You are dropping me into a rabbit hole that I will not escape for months. But Hockey Rock.
Okay, so Hockey Rock was released when in the final year of the Winnipeg Jets in '95, and it was the proceeds would go to the Jets Goals for Kids Foundation. But they got a bunch of bands together. They got Randy Bachman to re-record "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet," as that's One Hot Russian Jet. Alexei Zamenhof.
Really?
Yep, they got like all sorts of like Canadian hit songs like Colin James and Innocence is now Newmanin, like it's hilarious. It is a rarity to find. I'm sure you can find it online on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, this is one of my prized possessions here. Is Hockey Rock Winnipeg style.
And everybody who's listening, Nick from Winnipeg is holding up a beautiful CD of Hockey Rock, which I will delve into digitally in the near term. And hey, folks, too, Nick had mentioned the track Lottie in the Black and White Room. That's going to be at the end of the episode. So just wanted to let you know about that. But yeah, thanks for a bit dropping into. I'm a big film buff. Sounds like you are, and my listen about that my Winnipeg, and that's like. It's super to hear some more about that. Yeah, but labor history, hockey, and this and that. Now I got the podcast in Hockey Rock to go with. Wow, where are we now? Hey, Nick, I heard you. I actually did a bunch of research, and after you've done research on somebody, you say it out loud because you've done it, right? So
you gotta brag about it, man. That's very flattering. Thank you.
You don't have to pretend, But you said this really, cool bit. I think it might have been a podcast, maybe about a month ago, with the big music scene, Winnipeg music scene. Podcast, but
Witch Police is that podcast. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Much respect. Thank you for that. But right at the end, it ended just incredibly, and you said, "I see the thing. I want to make the thing."
That's true, man.
And it just ended like that, and you got the something rather than nothing. But I wanted to ask you, like, because I feel that too. What is that? See the thing, make the thing. What's like that? That's just the way you are.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been that way. Like at the end of the day, if I have something that didn't exist before, like if it's as simple as a drawing or, rearrange the posters on your wall, whatever it is, like I like to have something at the end of the day. Like, so a lot of like friend time, like hangout time, like it's always like, hey, like we should record a song, or like we should work on something together. And I went to U Winnipeg for film school, and a lot of it was like, we're all hanging out. We all have access to this film gear. So let's, make a short film this weekend type of thing. We all have our ideas. I don't know. I just have an idea and I want to make the thing. And if I don't make the thing, who else is going to make the thing? Right. Like, yeah. And you have 1,000,001 ideas, and it's also then your job to figure out like, okay, what is a good idea? Like I might have 50 ideas for comics, but I'm just going to make the one. I might have a bunch of ideas for, I'm also like, I write a thing, whether it's song lyrics or a script to a comic or whatever it is. Like I'll sit down and I'll write it in one kind of sitting. And I like to think of it as documentary songwriting. Like I rarely do I go back and do a rewrite. Same, like when I have the guys over to make the music, like you run through it a little bit, but when we hit record, that first take is usually the take. And maybe it's because I work with really incredible tight musicians that know how to vibe off of each other, but it's also just like we all understand that like we're capturing an idea here and we're not going to overthink it. So that's, and you know what, I have done the due diligence and I've overthought and I've worked on things for months and years and blah blah blah, and that's good too. But a lot of the time you just have to, and maybe it's like because I've worked as a journalist a little bit in my day job life, but like sometimes you have a deadline and you know the thing has to be done.
Yeah.
So just get the thing done and put it out and move on to the next thing. Because also if you sit and dwell on the same thing over and over again, then that might be the only thing that you do.
Yeah, yeah. I really love that. I really love that energy. Of course, like in with the philosophy podcast here, I heard you say thing and the thinginess of things, like in the being. We gotta drop a little bit into the conceptual here, which will be easy for you, but it's we're jumping between my love of Winnipeg and me staring at a lot of the figures you have behind you in the back.
Yeah, I'm in my toy room artist studio right now. A very solid Star Wars action figure collection behind me here.
Wonderful. Nick, what's art? What's art? What is it? What are you trying to do?
Art, I never feel better than when I'm drawing. And this has always been this way in my life. My mom tells a story about when we were moving and I was like 2 or whatever, moving into a new house, and she's unpacking and she leaves me alone for an hour or 3, realizes she's left me alone, goes over, finds me in a corner with a pad of paper and a pencil, and I'm just drawing away. And that's how I've been all my life. So art to me, like, I don't know if I'm an artist or not, but I'm a fan of art and I love to make things. And I never feel better than if I'm just sitting there listening to music, listening to a podcast, whatever it is, sitting silently, drawing, inking, coloring, writing, coming up with some sort of concept, mapping out the next 6 months or a year, whatever it is. Art is just getting your ideas and emotions out of your head, out of your body. It's a therapy thing. It's like I've dealt with anxiety for years, like this is a calming thing for me. And I was very wary to start, taking money for it, but people just kept coming to me and saying like, oh, I liked this. Could you do an illustration for me? Could you do an animated music video for me? Could you do this? Could you do that? And,
yeah,
the first thing you say is, well, do you have a budget? And if they, in Canada, you can apply for arts grants and things like that. So sometimes, a musician can get a few $1,000s and pay someone like
in the US, you got to rob somebody. You got grants up that way.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're very lucky here, and I mean grants are very hard to apply for as well. Like they make you do the work for them. You can spend days writing a grant, but also like, so yeah, like I was very self-conscious about taking it to that level, but also like because I'm not a graphic designer. And because so many people work in that field and you see so much art and it's so clean and perfect. And I was like, well, I sit there and I use my pencil and a pen or an ink brush or whatever it is. And then I can color digitally. I know how to do that. But then I started kind of looking into like the real like epiphany was over the pandemic. A lot of artists, like a publishing house called Drawn and Quarterly, here in Canada. They're based out of Montreal, and they put out Adrian Tomina is by far one of my favorite cartoonists. They put out his books, and they were doing like they couldn't do physical book launches, so they were doing these Instagram live at home things. And this artist named Joe Ullman, who he just put out a book called Fictional Father during the pandemic, and he's incredible, and he's been doing it for a million years. And he starts showing his Bristol board and his papers and how he draws by hand, and I was like, okay, like if that is still an acceptable form, then I'm really going to dive into this. If I'm not going to be judged for not using an iPad or whatever, then and then the more you get into it, the more you realize like, oh, it's probably 50-50, like give or take, of like people that are still drawing and inking organically to people that are picking up an iPad. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's whatever works for you. But I'm about to turn 40, and so I'm not really going to want to learn a new trick. That's really what it comes down to. And I feel comfortable. I like the pencil and the eraser and the ink and manipulating and doing watercolors and pencil crayons and other stuff like that. But I also like to digitally color because I like the way that looks. So yeah, it's time consuming to scan everything in, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, there's a piece bits we were talking about. I was thinking too about the zine, the podcast we have one issue of the zine,
Mhm.
something rather than nothing zine. And I tell you, just as far as the process, which was completely new for me, this a little while back. Second issue is coming out soon, all indigenous issue, but
Oh, sweet.
just seeing, just compiling and seeing, and for me, I'm an organizer. Like I always think in terms of organizing, like almost naturally of connections, right? And I could see, um, I could see how, particularly with music, I've heard you talk a bit about music and connecting with the scene, like organizing, doing things,
Mhm.
creating things. And so I really think about that a lot. And I wasn't overtly being more overt about doing art on my behalf. I didn't go in and say, oh, like that's what I'm trying to do. But it's so exciting and enthralling. So I've become very interested in scenes, like
Mhm.
Seattle art scene and what comes out of it, and really honing in and saying a scene can develop in a particular way, produce things that are completely unique to it, where I really didn't look closely enough. What do you? What my question is? I'm going on a bit about this, but I heard you talking about in Winnipeg and that. What is the energy or like the energy around the music and that type of connection that creates that scene that you inhabit and that you love?
Well, I mean, I'm making this multimedia project, right? And I'm not the only one in Winnipeg who is dabbling in more than one practice of making art. There's the like I would say that the film and the music scene very much intertwine. Like I've put on shows with projections and films and animations and stuff like that while the bands are playing, like for my own band and for other bands. Like, but it's how do I sum up the Winnipeg music scene? Winnipeg, if you may or may not know, Winnipeg is one of the coldest places on the planet. We were colder than Mars one winter about 10 years ago. Um, and so what happens in Winnipeg is that you hide in your basement for at least 7 months out of the year. You hide in your house. Like, yeah, like we also are the Slurpee capital of the world somehow, like year round.
Whoa.
Yeah, people are going Slurpees and murder. That was the two capitals that we were for a while. But yeah, so you'll go out in minus 40 degrees Celsius to get your Slurpee, but you'll hide out in your basement and you'll write songs and you'll jam with your band and stuff like that. And then we have it's a very like DIY scene, and there's a lot of musicians that kind of walk both lines. Like you can be a working musician and get your grant money to go on tour and make your record, and we have a number of like very world class musicians. Like I said, John K. Sampson of the Weakerthans. They're beyond incredible. Um, some really amazing talents here that have been doing it for years, producers, musicians, songwriters. Um, but we also have this underground where there's these bands that come up and they live long enough to release their EP. And then their last show that they played is the EP release show. Like there's this, we have this thing where we want to make something, we're going to play a show before we're ready, and we're going to play this dive, and it's going to be amazing. And it is a real like if 5% of the bands that broke up actually like kept going, they would have been like the next big thing. Like in the 90s it was the like that Seattle sound, and then they came to Canada and went to Halifax where they found like Sub Pop and other labels, Electra stuff. Like they found Eric's Trip and Thrush Hermit and all of those great bands that were along the lines of a Seattle sound.
Mhm.
But in Winnipeg, we've got like a big like folk music is kind of the default in Winnipeg, but also just like weird, like experimental droning whatever music is also the norm in Winnipeg. So you are just as likely if you go to a show to see someone playing the theremin or the saw or whatever, as you are to see them playing an acoustic guitar. Or, like, I mean, there was Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth. I believe his wife is from Winnipeg, actually, so he's spent some time here and he's done the odd show. He was playing a new music festival gig with Jim Jarmusch was also on the bill. And they were doing these, just like, they were like, after the big show at the big beautiful theater, they went and played this like very small show at like a dive bar. And at one point, Lee had strapped a guitar to the ceiling and was just swinging it around. There was no stage. He was just in the corner of the room and he's beating the shit out of it. And then this other guy, who's got a Winnipeg experimental band called Field, and is also a filmmaker, Greg Hannock. So Greg is like, he's just like jangling bells and making all these, it's just like sound experiment. And that was a big moment for me to just click and be like, music can be anything. Art can be anything. Art is an experience. Art is by yourself. Art is with people. It can be anything. And I mean, I'm sure that most of the people that walked away from that show were like, that was complete nonsense. But there was, the small pocket of us that were like, that was important. Thank you so much for coming to our glacier of a city and making noise.
I love that. And in the sound, I had this just on this bit. I was at a show one time and I was super excited for it. And the name of the band, they were called Slow Music, and they were an absolute super band. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they would pop up in different areas. So here's the lineup. And this is the best way I can do it. You had Robert Fripp, Peter Buck from REM, who lived in Portland, would be on the guitar. They had a drummer from Pearl Jam, and the dude from Ministry and Revolting Cocks.
Oh wow!
Spacing out, I'm spacing out who that was. But anyways, unbelievable, right? And they just were experimental jazz, and so I watched it. I wanted to figure out when the show was starting, like as a like. When was this beginning? And somebody behind me told me they had seen him once before. And they said, I was the only person watching the show because they played a 10, 15-minute show. And he was like, they're playing now.
Yeah.
And everybody else was like, he's like, they're playing their show now. And he said he watched this show. They walked off when people were saying, hey, we're... So just the sound and the happening. When does the show start? Is that the music or is that the pre? Or
yeah, I mean, I love that and I love that experience, but I also love being like, okay, the doors are at 7:30, show is at 8. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch the show. Not as much anymore, but still like going to the bar show like at 2 a.m. or whatever. Like it's like there is no right or wrong way to have a show or to see a show. The hardest thing is getting people to come to your show. But, once you get them in the room, then they are yours to lose. So you better deliver. And if you are losing them, just whip out a Joy Division cover or something. And then
there we go. Hey, final question on the Winnipeg, and this is the curiosity bit. Sure. I know in places where it's very cold and that are in the middle part of the country, huge metal places like Detroit and Milwaukee and Cleveland, all those spots. Is metal big up in Winnipeg because of the conditions and the sheer difficulty of surviving in such temperatures?
No, not right. Like, I don't know. We've got like
metal's been defeated partially.
Yeah, it's just like metal can warp. Like it
has to be warm enough for the instruments to make the noises too. So
yeah, like we have this thing every February called Festival de Voyageur, where musicians are told not to bring certain instruments on stage. Like they play outdoors in sometimes -30°C, right? And you're like, yeah, like don't play that particular instrument. Like it's not going to last type thing. But like, I don't know. I mean, we all just survived this. We've all like, I have in my front porch, I have heated floors. Like that's how crazy it gets here. But we survive it because we don't know any other way, and we don't want to leave because the summers are hot and beautiful, And we all have cabins just outside the city where we go and relax. And we don't all have cabins outside the city. I'm lucky my parents have a cabin outside the city where I can go and relax. But it is hot and it is beautiful, and we have a ton of music festivals all summer long and theater festivals, and we need more film festivals. But there's a lot going on in Winnipeg, and there's always someone with some crazy idea who gets something going. And sometimes it lasts for more than a year. Sometimes it is like a very one-off thing. But yeah, Winnipeg is an idea city.
Cool. Thank you so much for dropping into that. And everybody, hey, it's Winnipeg time. It's Winnipeg time. I've had Leticia Spence on the show, and they did the Indigenous logo of the Manitoba Moose, which is the minor league affiliate, and also the Winnipeg Jets, the Indigenous logo. Beautiful, beautiful design. And hey, what I wanted to ask, because I do like to ask this question, and it's related to art, but the role of art right now, I've been asking folks, like, is something changed? Is there something different about the role of art, or is it just this is what art does, no matter when it is? What are your thoughts on that?
We live in a world right now where everything that you do has to be monetized in some way, which I don't agree with, and I don't like that competition and that hustle and everything. But you do have to work harder to just stand out and to connect with someone like yourself. Like, you reached out to me to have this conversation today, and I'm just like, I'm always so grateful anytime a drawing or a song or whatever connects with somebody, man, because it is hard. There's so much stuff. There's all the music that existed before we were born. There's all the music and art that existed while we were growing up. And now there's more than ever, because it is that old, we all have the microphone now, and there's just so much noise, and there's so much to consume. And if I just want to listen to the bands that I grew up with, that's fine. If I want to find some new music, that's fine too, because I have more options and more ways to consume this stuff than I ever had. Yeah. But I think that because there is such a conversation around making and mental health and all of this stuff, that art is more important than ever. And I think too that the kids that are, and I don't mean like in a derogatory way, the kids, like I call people kids and kiddos because it's like a term of endearment for me. So the kids and kiddos coming up that are making stuff, they have access to learn. Like, we had to work very hard. Like, we would listen to campus radio, and we would, my older cousin, who's 10 years my senior, would tell me about cool stuff. And that's how I learned about cool stuff. Yeah. And now it's like at your fingertips, you can flip through Instagram or what have you and find amazing stuff. But also, we don't spend as much time with the stuff, unfortunately. So like, I might spend a month making a comic book, and someone flipping by on Instagram will see the post about it, and they click the like, and they might not check it out or whatever. But hey, at least I had their attention for a split second. And you hope that everyone who goes by is like, okay, I've seen this going around. I'm actually gonna spend some real time checking it out. And you just hope that your words, whether you're trying to entertain or enlighten or educate, or just take somebody's mind off the hell that is the world right now. That's all you can do. And all I'm trying to do is, I make stuff that I know I would like, and that if I were a person consuming this stuff, like, I'd like this music, or I'd like these comics or whatever. Like the Olivia Sea comic is very much like, I call it like a quote unquote superhero satire, like The Tick or something, but it's also very grounded in the reality of, am I good enough? All these anxieties. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff, like, because if you don't care about your characters, then why should I care about the story that you're telling? And so you have to have well-rounded characters that work. And that's something I take from film class. Like, that's thing number one that my professor, John Kozak, would say to us: why am I watching these characters? Why do I care about these characters? Yeah. Anytime I watch a film or read a book or read a comic or whatever it is, why do I care about these characters? You got it. And whether they're a likable, unlikable protagonist, whatever, just give me a reason to hook into it. Like, there's so many gimmicks and whatever, and it's like, even like you turn on some new Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and it's like, why do I care about this character? Well, because it's Spider-Man. It's like, right. But if I've never heard of Spider-Man before, why do I care about Spider-Man? Well, because he's like this like, oh gee shucks kid.
Yeah,
and he likes that girl and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, and that's why we like Spider-Man, because we've all had a crush on a girl that was out of our league or whatever it is, right? Like, so, and that was something very smart that that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko did, was they were like, we need to make these characters relatable. And a lot of that stuff gets lost in the like, you know, oh, the art is incredible. It's like, yep, the art is incredible, but the story that you're telling with the art is not so great. So I don't know whether you're an artist who doesn't, like, I don't know. I'm like a middle, like, I'm a pretty good artist and a pretty good writer. Like, I'm not the best, I'm not the worst, but I'm like John Cusack in High Fidelity when he's like, I'm not the dumbest guy in the room. I'm certainly not the smartest guy.
I know who I am.
Yeah, I know who I am.
I can move between.
Yeah, like that's kind of where I am. Like I'm comfortable in my groove, and if you like the stuff I put out, thank you. That's awesome. If you don't like the stuff, hey, no sweat off my back. There's a million other things in the world to like. So that's how I approach everything. And I don't remember what your original question was.
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you listen to this podcast before, I mean, it's why is there something rather than nothing? If you're going to ask that question in the show, I mean, everybody's coming in and, you know, but hey, I did want to ask you that and make sure I ask you that. I heard your answer in the I see the thing, I want to make the thing, but I never want to take away the opportunity to take in a crack at the why is there something rather than nothing?
Why is there something rather than nothing? Because if there is nothing, then there's no conversation about it. If there is something, then you can connect and you can have a conversation. And that's really like, this is all about connecting with people. This is you and I connecting right now. This is someone on a bus listening to us connecting right now, feeling like they're observing us, you know, have a conversation, whatever it is, connecting with us that way. Talking about art is just as important as making art. I've been on all sides of it. I've been a film critic. I've been a music critic. I've made art. I've put my name on my stuff and put my money where my mouth is. So making something rather than nothing is important to the conversation. It's important if you're someone who wants to leave a legacy. It's important if you're someone who just has something to say. Just getting something out feels better than not getting something out.
Yeah, man. I really dig that. I wanted to drop into something here, Nick. So we're talking about comics and it's getting excited about them. For me, it's the color, it's the pizzazz, it's the counterculture. But I gotta tell you something. I've started to paint and create more things that are from my hands just the last few years. I'm 50 right now, about the last 5 years or so. But I've had ideas of characters that have been percolated in my head about comic characters and this and that. And, you know, without them flowing right off the pen, they, you know, inhabit a certain space. But I work with Mark J. Palm, who is an artist I've had on the show. And I told him, I said, Mark, I don't know what I'm asking. Can you create this character that's in my head? And I was so excited about it because I'm trying to tell Mark at the same time, yo, these things have been in my head for a long time and they haven't gone out the pen. So Mark and I have he's created the manifestation of the first superhero that emanates out of the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. And this character is Cyborg Harambe. Harambe taking out at the Cincinnati Zoo in a very unfortunate incident that impacted everybody. But a lot of people don't know that they were able to reconstitute Harambe as Cyborg Harambe, as maybe righting the wrongs of the world as it goes along. So I, for the first time in my life, have what was in my being up here, working with the comic creator to create Cyborg Harambe. And if that's not the power of art and telling
Yeah.
you, Nick, about Cyborg Harambe and the things you create as well, then I'm not sure. I'm happy to be able to do these type of arty things with you, honestly, and
Yeah, man.
it's a real blast.
That sounds awesome, by the way.
It's coming.
Just
I got to even go to
yeah.
Mark. I say, I don't know how to hold this entity. How do we push it out into the world? And we'll be doing that. So Cyborg Harambe and righting the wrongs of the world. Nick, how do folks all around the world, listeners of Something Rather Than Nothing, get in contact? You've mentioned a few ways to get in touch with your music and your visuals. You also write, and you have a collection of short stories as well, I believe, Nick. How do folks do all these things, including the book Understanding Anti-Skip Technology, Short Stories and Other Nonsense?
Yes. That is
Where do we go?
You can go to, for all your Olivia Sea stuff, oliviasea.net, or at Olivia Sea 33 on all your socials. So there's animated music videos, there is music, find it all on Spotify, and Apple and Bandcamp and things like that. You can also find just my regular portfolio website, nicolastronaut.wordpress.com. And I'm at Nicolastronaut on all your socials. That is a name I came up with in the MySpace days, and I've kept it going ever since.
Thank you for doing that.
You can find me on there and just hit me up. I've got all this stuff for sale, like through a Big Cartel page, and that's all linked off of both websites. The book of short stories is super fun. It comes with a CD as well of a bunch of songs that I've written over the years that different people have played. So like different bands, and then covers that other people have done of my songs, which is always incredibly flattering. It's a collection of short stories that are like, some are total nonsense and some are super funny. Like, a young woman tries to rescue her aunt from her uncle's supposed ghost, only to find herself in a house filled with Louis Riel impersonators. Louis Riel was a Canadian. Well, you'll figure it out. Two girls break into houses for fun and turn it into a babysitting gig. A young man tries to get a job developing photos and is nearly swallowed up by a hole in his crush's driveway, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's a fun collection. And then I have issue 1 and 2 of The Unpredictable Olivia Sea are available to order right now. And I will be at TCAF in Toronto at the end of April, the final weekend in April, and that is a big show. And I will
tell us about that. Tell us about that event. I'm not familiar with it. Tell us about it.
TCAF is Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and it is the big show. Like, publishers like Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly will be there.
Oh my!
Big names have got like Neil Gaiman, the cartoonist kayfabe guys like Jim Rugg and Ed Piskor, like all sorts of like not just Canadians, but big American and European names will come to TCAF. It is a 2-day event in downtown Toronto at their Reference Library, which is like a 5-story building. So it's 3 floors of comics. I hear that they have about 25,000 people come through. I was incredibly humbled to put in my submission and be accepted this year. So to be able to take my stuff and go to this big show in Toronto.
That's a big one. That's a big one then, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is a big one. So I'm pretty excited. So I'll be selling like some exclusive variant covers of Olivia Sea at that show, as well as like you can pick up the cassette there. You can pick up the book. But I'm just like, anytime I go to one of these shows in Winnipeg or in a different city, it's just so cool to be around other creators for a few days, and just like, they pick my brain about Winnipeg and the scene, and I pick their brain about like just like making stuff, like, well, how do you get this printed? Do you do this yourself? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and it feels, the first one I went to, I was like, I've never felt more like myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to mention on like that type of atmosphere. I went to just a zine fest in Portland, right? And it wasn't just that. It was one at a hotel, but Craig Thompson, who's done Blankets and
Yeah.
he was there. Mark Palm, that's where I met Mark Palm and had him on the show. I met Jack Kent, who does Sketchy People, had him on the show. Veronica Casson does Grind Like a Girl zines there. But on this point too, where you go and then like you're having these conversations, and it's if you're into it and you're unapologetic about your enjoyment, then that's why I've had 5 or 6 guests come out of the thing, because I'm like, oh, you too. That's really cool. So, no, I totally get that, that vibe in the Toronto bit. You can't tell me too much more about it. You got to promote it, because I got to get to Winnipeg before I get to Toronto, or maybe I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I have been I grew up in the northeast of the U.S. in Rhode Island, so I've spent some time up in Toronto, Ontario. I adore Montreal, but have not been to Winnipeg, and I will look to visit you when I make it up to the.
Yeah, man, definitely. If you, I hope I've sold you on Winnipeg. I hope I've sold you all on Winnipeg. It is a creative hub. It is I've had friends who have left and gone on to, sometimes they move to Toronto, sometimes they move to the States to quote unquote make it type of thing. But I've done enough work here to know that you can stay in Winnipeg. And a lot of those people came back to Winnipeg too, because, but I don't know why you would, if you want to leave a city to chase your dreams or whatever, like, go do it. That's great. But I haven't quite felt the need to do that. I feel like I can make things at my level and stay comfortable. And if I were a better musician, I'd be going out on tour. But I'm not a great musician. I'm an okay musician. I think I'm a good songwriter, and that's why I have like these great musicians play on these Olivia Sea records. And I play a little too, like bass or synthesizer or whatever, but because I don't go on tour with a band, I go on tour with comics. And so I'm there's a few shows that maybe haven't been announced yet that I'll also be going to across the country. But Toronto, end of April. Look for me, Nick Friesen. Look for Olivia Sea at TCAF in Toronto at the end of April.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting to hear, and I really appreciate it, Nick. I got to tell you, it's been great chatting with you. And when I told you right up, I was like, I'm just going to approach him directly, like Winnipeg Jets. I didn't say biggest Winnipeg Jets fan in Oregon. I'll take on all comers. But the Jets in the comic and dropping into cassettes and talking comics and talking philosophy. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I think we both have to apologize to our partner Jenny's for whatever this has engendered with regards to rabbit holes and otherwise. Apologies in advance for my dropping into hockey rock probably for the next 3.5 days. But
my wife actually wrote she's a writer, and she wrote a column about hockey rock and did a deep dive with the guy who created it and everything, and that's on the Winnipeg Free Press website.
You've taken away my question as who do I talk to next. It looks like if we have that deep research on hockey rock, that's how the show rolls. So Nick, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to spend some time and chatting about this. Folks, as I mentioned, Lottie in the Black and White Room will be the track taking us out. But Nick Friesen, thank you so much for popping on the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast.
Thanks so much, Ken. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
You too, man.
Stop.
This is something rather than nothing.
I like that part at the end.